This is part 2 of the Craftsman 6-inch joiner rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 1, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we'll be continuing with the disassembly. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. Okay, continuing where we left off, we're separating the cutter head assembly. And there is a retaining ring on this end here that we're looking at. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove that retaining ring. And we'll set that aside. And all this is pretty well frozen, seized up, so we'll use some PB Blaster on it, and then we'll come back to that later. There are 3 spherical washers that I'm pulling off now. There's the last one. I'll get that part out of the way. So we have the swing guard insert. That's made out of Zamek. And then we've got a couple badges that we need to knock off of this. So we're going to remove the logo, Craftsman logo panel. And it uses drive screws, and there's holes drilled all the way through, so you can just tap them from the back side with a punch. And there's the logo panel. And then we've got the model number panel. And same thing. Just tap them from the back side with a punch. Ended up changing out that punch for this little punch tool I ended up making. And there we go. And there's the model number panel. So we can set that aside. And this is the swing guard pin support, and it has 2 screws and lock washers. It's just a hunk of metal. Next, we have the depth of cut gauge. And this has 2 slotted screws that hold it in place. And then we have the front cover, which is engine turned. And these drive screws, you can't access them from the backside. So what I'm attempting to do is cut a slot in them and then try to spin them out with a flat tip screwdriver. And this works for me about 50% of the time. However, today it worked 0% of the time. So half of that head of that drive screw broke off. So we're just going to mask up around it and then use a chisel and knock that other half of the head off. And there we go. So I'll show you in a little while how we're going to get those the remaining parts of those drive screws out of there. But we've got one more head on the other side, or one more drive screw on the other side. So again, we'll give it a shot. We'll try to slot it. And this is really the best way to get a blind drive screw out. But yeah, we're 2 for 2 here. This one doesn't want to. It started to turn, and then you can see how we've already got it rotated a little bit. And then the head just came completely off. So I think there's just a little bit of the head left there, and we just knocked it off like that. So there's that engine turned panel. So what I'm going to do to get these out of here is I'm going to center punch both of them, because we're going to be drilling them out. And I've gone ahead and clamped down the joiner body, and I'm using a drill bit that's the exact same size as the drive screws, and I'm just drilling it out. And right now I'm adjusting the depth of my drill press, because the drive screws we'll be using to reassemble all this are 1/4 inch long. So we just need to go 1/4 inch and then a little more, so something like 3/8 into the cast iron. And once we're golden, we flipped it over and did the exact same thing for the other side. So with that finished, we have the fence guide bar, and it's got these caps on each end of it. And with a flathead screwdriver, I'm able to get one of them started. They're just pressed in there. So we can get one out. Then we'll use a wooden dowel to punch the other one out. Like so. Next, we have the link assembly, and there are 2 cotter pins holding it all together. So I'm bending those cotter pins straight, and then we'll push or pull those out. There's one on this end, and then there's one on the other end. And behind that cotter pin, there is a washer and then a spring. Washer, spring. And then you've got that dowel that we'll just knock out of there in a minute. So we'll do the same thing for this end. As far as I could tell, that bar is uniform on both ends. I don't think it has to go, one way specifically. The holes for the dowels and everything, they all look like they're equal distances from the edge and all that. So no problems with reassembly. We'll be replacing those cotter pins. So I'm just using a block of wood, and we'll just drive that dowel through the assembly. And they came out real easy. No problem whatsoever. Okay, so the cutting head assembly has these socket head cap screws that hold the blades and the wedges inside the head. And there are these two, and then there are two more just to the right of these. And of course the other two are a different size Allen. And there are 3 blades with 3 wedges. So once you've gotten these other 2 cap screws loosened, you can pull out the blade, and then you can pull out the wedge. And then you just need to do that 2 more times. And there are these 2 openings in the center of the drum, and they have Allen head set screws inside them. And there's actually 2 sets in each hole. So I've removed these first 2. And I didn't realize there were 2 more deep inside there, but we get them out later on. And then we can go ahead and keep working around the drum and pull out the other 2 blades and wedges. So after I got all the blades and wedges out of there, I need to get the pulley off of the shaft that it's on. And it's really rusted on there. So I'm going to use this puller. And I'm using it upside down from how you would normally use it, because I want it to just rest on the flat face of the outside of the pulley. And then we started pulling on it. And this will not damage the pulley. And it's really rusted on there, but we get it off of there. There's a woodruff key on the shaft, and this pulley is a keyed pulley, so we're having to clear the shaft as well as that key, which I think it's a 1/4 inch key. So there we go. Pulley is off, and we did not damage it. Now, to get that woodruff key out of there, I'm using a flat tip screwdriver, and I'm just going to tap on it. And there goes the key. Next, I'm using this 3-arm puller. And I can get 3 of those arms on the bearing bracket. To pull the bearing and bracket off of the shaft. And I've got the cutting head assembly clamped to my work table by the other bracket right now. But once we get one of these brackets off, we're going to have to move over to the vise. And there we go. So that bearing is still inside the bracket. So we're probably, yep, we're going to move to the vise. And we'll just put the bracket inside the vise. And I've got a box sitting under the vise with a bunch of bubble wrap in it to catch the cutting head once it comes loose. I don't want to break the bracket. But we get it going. And everything came loose. All right, so looking down in there, there are 2 more set screws. So we're getting those out of there, and then we're going to drive the shaft out of the drum. And we found out that there were 2 more set screws in there because I didn't show this, but I was beating on that shaft with a rubber dead blow hammer and it was not budging. And I was like, what the hell is holding it in there? So I got a flashlight and yeah, there were 2 more set screws in there. So now we can drive that shaft out of the drum. We're just resting the drum on the vise jaws and letting the shaft drop through the center. And it'll help if I'm higher up. And again, I've got a box sitting under it with some bubble wrap to catch that shaft when it finally goes through. But it was slow going all the way. And then it went. And that will go together much easier once everything is cleaned up. So now we need to get those bearings out of the bearing brackets. And we're just going to put the bracket in the vise. And then I've got a bearing pusher. I think that's what it's called. And we just drive the bearing out like so. We'll do the same for the other one. Too easy. Next, we need to disassemble the fence. So we've got the sliding guard, and it has 2 screws with lock washers on them. And those are outer lock washers. And then to remove the protractor and scale assembly, there are 3 screws holding it onto the fence. Sorry, my head's in the way. And then it comes off of there. And that's the fence. Then we need to remove the scale from the protractor. And it's also held in there with drive screws, and those drive screws have holes that go all the way through. So you can just use a punch to tap out the drive screws. And then the scale will come right off of there. And that protractor is made out of Zamek as well. Okay, well, the disassembly of the stand is pretty simple. The motor and the extension cord plug into the back of that power panel, so you just unplug them. And then there's one square head screw that is holding each one of these brackets on. And I'm just removing that screw and then lifting the bracket off of the column. We'll do the same thing for the other bracket. And then we'll remove that far column. It has a square head screw at the bottom, holding it in the base. And then coming back over here, we're going to disassemble the column mount for the motor. So this half of it came away pretty good, but the other half is rusted and kind of getting hung up there. So once we've got the nut and the washer off, we'll take that half of the bracket, and then we can pick up the motor. And that other half of the bracket is loose, so it just fell. We'll grab that. Next, we've got the last column, so square head screw again, and go ahead and twist that sucker out of there and then pull the column out. So we just need to get that screw out of the base, and then we're done. And that'll complete this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we'll take apart those pieces off of the column and start disassembling, I think, the motor. I can't remember now. But yeah, so as always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.